Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also, share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. Jake and Katie met at a mutual friend's birthday party when they were both quite young. He was 25, she was 23. The town in which they lived was small, everyone knew each other, and the parties were usually noisy, fun, but in a close circle. That day, Jake came there after a grueling day at a construction site. He was already trying to escape from his parents' house, working overtime to afford rent. Katie, on the other hand, had just finished her management course and was looking for a job. She wanted a holiday, something new, inspiring. They both didn't plan to fall in love. They were just looking for a little outlet in a noisy company. "Hey," she said first when she noticed Jake sitting alone with a plastic cup of half-drunk beer. "Oh, hi," he looked up. His hair was slightly disheveled, and there was fatigue in his eyes. "Sorry, I'm not really in the mood to talk. It's been a hard day. I saw you just helping Steve rearrange tables. You seem to be more tired than any other guest at this party," she smiled. "Yes, I generally work a lot, and I ended up here only because Steve insisted. He said if I don't come, he will be offended, and I don't like it when people take offense at me. He really knows how to make anyone come." Katie snorted and, after hesitating, sat down next to him. "He literally pulled me out by the hand, too." The party continued, laughter and music merged into a roar, and the two of them, standing by the window or sitting on an old sofa, talked about everything in the world. About how difficult it is to live in a small town without a normal job, about how hard it is to save up for something serious like an apartment when your salary barely covers your basic needs. And suddenly, in this frank conversation, they both felt something in common. They understood what it was like to want something more than you can afford. They both dreamed. Katie about a career, about her own business, about freedom, and Jake about his own home, where he could hang pictures on the walls without asking permission from the landlord. From that evening, their connection began to grow stronger. At first, it was a rare SMS with questions, "How is your day?" Then a joint walk in the park, when after the rain heavy drops settled on the trees. Soon the real dates began, and at every step they discovered that, despite the difference in character, they had something to talk about. Jake, calm, a little reserved and serious, saw in Katie the lightness and energy that he lacked. She, at times fussy and anxious, found peace and confidence next to him. 6 months later, Jake admitted that he was in love. He said this modestly, without pathos. "You know, I was always afraid that I wouldn't be able to build a serious relationship. I thought that my life was too hard, my work was unstable. But when I'm with you, for the first time it seems to me that everything will be fine. I love you." And at that moment something inside her responded. Katie realized that she also felt something special for him that she had not experienced before. She answered without fear, "And I love you, Jake." Against the backdrop of everyday problems, small joys, and the lack of great prospects in their hometown, these words sounded to them like a promise of a better life. They were young, complete optimism seemed justified. They wanted to believe that together they could cope with everything. And this feeling turned out to be so strong that after a few months they decided to get married. Perhaps it all happened too quickly, perhaps they were too naive, but their love burned brightly and seemed invincible. Jake and Katie's parents were skeptical at first about such plans, but the young people were determined. "We are already adults," Katie once told her mother. "And of course, we don't have much money, but we don't want to wait another 10 years, Jake added to his father. The wedding was modest but cozy. A warm summer day, a white gazebo in the courtyard of Steve's house, a couple of dozen guests, the closest people, music from an old tape recorder, and hugs, hugs, hugs. No one threw rice or flew pigeons, but there was a premonition of miracles in the air. One of the few serious expenses was Katie's dress. Since childhood, she had dreamed of getting married in a beautiful white dress. "You look like a princess," Jake whispered when he saw her on her wedding day. The main thing is that you are my king, she winked in response, and in both their eyes there was that strange sparkle that lovers have when they are sure that the whole world lies at their feet. The first months after the wedding flew by in euphoria. Jake and Katie rented a tiny apartment in the suburbs as soon as they could save up for a down payment. The place was not luxurious one-bedroom, a small living room combined with a kitchen area and a cramped hallway, which they turned into something like a wardrobe. But it was a lot of housing. In the morning, they woke up together to the sounds of an alarm clock that rang loudly and obnoxiously, but it even made them happy, waking each other up, making coffee on a tiny stove, looking out the window at the still sleepy streets. All this filled their little life with special meaning. Their conversations were full of plans. "We'll buy a house someday, right?" Katie asked, sitting on the floor, going through old books to put them on the shelf. "Necessarily. With a garden and maybe a small swimming pool. At least inflatable," Jake joked, hugging her from behind. They laughed when their gaze fell on the peeling wallpaper, but even this cramped space seemed cute. The new life together was like an adventure. They didn't have a lot of money. Jake continued to work at a construction site where they paid by the piece and there weren't many orders in the small town. Katie worked part-time at a local supermarket while she looked for a job in her specialty in order to somehow advance in management. But all this seemed to be temporary difficulties that could easily be overcome. One evening, just a couple of months after the wedding, Jake came home beaming with joy. "Kat, can you imagine? I was appointed foreman at a new facility. This is more money and a more stable schedule," he exclaimed right from the doorway. "This is great," Katie rushed to him with hugs. "I was so afraid that more experienced people would overtake me. But it seems that the boss thought that I was responsible enough. Now we can save a little for that house we dreamed of." That evening, they ordered pizza and sat at the table for an hour, going through options on where to invest the extra money. Of course, saving for a house was still a fantasy, but at least for a normal car is already a step towards the dream. And all this time, joy rang in the air because their future together seemed happy. After a few more weeks, Katie began to notice changes in her well-being. Weakness in the morning, sudden attacks of nausea, and inexplicable anxiety. She took a pregnancy test, and when she saw 2 lines, her heart sank. "Jake, I have a surprise," she said in a trembling voice in the evening when he returned from work. "Surprise?" he asked again, not immediately understanding. "We are expecting a baby," she said and looked into his eyes, trying to determine his reaction. Jake was confused. A child. His face reflected a whole storm of emotions in a few seconds: surprise, joy, anxiety. But in the end, a smile stretched across his lips. "This is amazing. Of course, I'm a little afraid, but I've always wanted a son or daughter. We can handle it, right?" "Of course we can handle it," Katie replied, and they hugged each other with the feeling that they had found a new meaning in life. Fear of financial difficulties, lack of experience, everything faded into the background. They had love and a common future in the form of a small life that was already in its infancy. The pregnancy proceeded calmly, although it was not easy in a rented apartment. Little space, many small worries. First, toxicosis, then constant fatigue, and in the last months, back pain. But Jake tried to support his wife. He learned to cook simple dishes, soups, porridges, and began to understand the care of pregnant women. They read books together about how to care for a child and watched videos. Financially, things were still tight, but Jake's new role as foreman allowed him to bring home a little more money. So from time to time, they bought cute baby things: tiny socks, bodysuits, blankets. A few weeks before the expected due date, they began to prepare mentally. "Do you think I can be a good mother?" Katie asked, lying on the bed, holding her rounded belly. "You're already a better mother," Jake whispered and put his hand on her stomach, trying to feel the baby's movements. They chose the name, Liam. They liked the sound of it and thought it reflected hope for a brighter future. And when the day of birth arrived, everything happened relatively quickly. Jake was nervous in the corridor of the maternity hospital, and Katie, despite the pain, held on as best she could. "I hear him scream. Jake exclaimed as the nurse came out to him with a smile. "Congratulations, Dad. You're having a boy." Liam was born healthy, with a loud cry that seemed to announce to the whole world, "I have arrived." And at that moment, all worries, all fatigue, all fears dissolved into a feeling of happiness. Jake looked at his son's tiny face and felt a previously unknown warmth spreading in his chest. Katie, exhausted, but with shining eyes, accepted his congratulations and kind words. However, reality quickly brought them back to earth. Liam turned out to be a restless child, often crying. The first months of the baby's life turned for Jake and Katie into an endless series of lack of sleep, fuss, and constant worry about their son's health. "Why is he crying? Maybe his tummy hurts," Katie asked in the middle of the night, rocking Liam in her arms. "Maybe the teeth are starting to cut," Jake suggested, although he knew that it was most likely too early for teeth. Nevertheless, despite all the difficulties, they retained the feeling that this was the most wonderful thing that could happen. Small family, modest apartment, but so much love. In the evenings, after particularly difficult days, they fell asleep together on the same sofa, Liam in the cradle next to him, and next to him was Jake's hand, squeezing Katie's hand. And so days, weeks, months passed. When Liam turned 1, the fairy tale aura of the first few months began to fade. Rents were rising, electricity bills were rising, and in general, the financial situation was becoming more and more tense. "Jake, we have another water bill," Katie said one evening, laying out receipts on the kitchen table. "God, how much can you?" Jake sighed, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He had just come from a construction site, where he carried heavy loads from morning to night. "When will we get out of this hole?" They tried to get by, saving on groceries, buying second-hand things for Liam. But there was still barely enough money. "Maybe I should look for another job," Katie suggested. "Yes, but where will you go? You have to sit with Liam almost all day, and we can't pay for kindergarten for him yet," Jake reasonably objected. Sometimes Katie worked part-time at night, stocking shelves in a supermarket, so she could be with the child during the day while Jake worked in construction. They lived literally non-stop without sleep or rest. On such days, conversations were kept to a minimum. "Did you pick up your laundry from the laundry?" "Yes." "What's wrong with Liam? How is he feeling?" "Fine." "Okay, I'm going to bed. I have to get up for work in 3 hours." Fatigue accumulated, and with it came irritation. Quarrels began to arise over almost everything: unwashed dishes, scattered toys, late shopping. "You don't understand how hard it is for me at work," Jake shouted in moments of despair. "Don't you understand that I'm home alone with a child, and it's not easy for me either?" Katie retorted, hugging Liam, who was starting to cry from the noise. Every omission turned into a scandal, and apologies were difficult. They found less and less time to just sit next to each other and have a heart-to-heart talk as before. Romance seemed to melt away in a stream of everyday problems. However, both understood that deep down they still loved each other. It just seemed to them that life left no opportunity to enjoy this love. One morning, Katie tried to speak. "Jake, we need to change the situation somehow. Maybe move closer to your work, or..." "Or what?" He sighed tiredly, pulling on his work boots. "We don't have money to move. At least we can somehow cope with this tiny apartment. If we move to a place closer, the rent is more expensive." And this conversation reached a dead end like many others. By the time Liam was a year and a half old, the tension was almost palpable. They still held out, but every day resembled a battlefield where they had to survive. Eventually, the day came when they realized they could no longer pay rent. "We were given 2 weeks to pay off the debt or move out," said Katie, looking at the paper they received from the owner of the apartment. "We don't have this amount." Jake ruffled his hair. "Damn, damn, damn, damn. What should we do?" They sat down at the table and were silent. Liam played quietly on the floor, not realizing how serious adult problems were. "It seems like the only option is to move in with my mother," Jake said reluctantly. "To Margaret?" Katie immediately tensed. She knew that her mother-in-law did not like her. From the very beginning, Margaret was skeptical about this marriage. She believed that her son needed a more capable girl. But Grandma Edna is also there. It will be very difficult there. Yes, I understand, Jake nodded. But you see, there are no other options yet. At least temporarily until I find a better paying job or save up for rent again. My mother's pension allows her to pay for utilities. The house is large. We will be given one room, and Liam will have somewhere to run. Maybe you'll even be able to save money because you won't have to pay for housing. Katie bit her lip. She didn't want this, but the alternative was to end up on the street. Okay, she gave in. Let's try. But Jake, promise us we won't be stuck there for long. I promise, he answered quietly, although there was uncertainty in his voice. So they decided to move. The day before the move, they packed boxes with things: children's clothes, toys, their few dishes, a couple of books that they had managed to buy over the years of marriage. All this fit into several large bags and a couple of boxes. When the apartment was empty, Katie looked at the bare walls with a feeling of defeat. It was as if these walls were mocking them, reminding them of unfulfilled hopes. Jake walked up to her. Hey, we'll be back to normal. I promised. I know, she answered, but there was already bitterness in her voice. The next day, they handed over the keys to the owner and went to Margaret's house. Liam was glad for the change of scenery, laughing as their car bounced over the bumps, trying to reach the pile of toys lying nearby. But Katie and Jake thought only of one thing, that now a new life awaits them, and they are not sure whether they will stand the test that the future has in store for them. The house they arrived at was in an old neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. This two-story mansion once looked majestic, but time and lack of renovation have taken their toll. Margaret, Jake's mother, lived here with her 80-year-old mother, Edna. Jake and Katie were supposed to take over the second-floor room where he grew up. When the car stopped at the gate, Margaret was already standing on the porch with an eternally dissatisfied expression on her face. A middle-aged woman, her hair is pulled back into a formal bun, and she wears glasses. Seeing Jake helping Katie out of the car, she pursed her lips with displeasure. Well, have you decided to return after all? She asked with a grin, while not taking her eyes off her grandson. Hi, Mom, Jake said quietly, looking down. Thank you for agreeing to shelter us. Where are you going to go? Nowadays, young people are too confident in their abilities, and then they still run to their parents, Edna grumbled, peeking over Margaret's shoulder. Gray hair, collected in a neat braid, and narrowed eyes betrayed her as a woman accustomed to command. Katie smiled tightly. Hello, Grandma. We really appreciate your help. Edna nodded, as if accepting this handout. Well, come into the house. Since you're here, we'll have to tolerate you. This reception did not bode well for an easy stay, but they had no choice. Jake began unloading the trunk, and Katie took Liam's hand and followed Margaret into the house. You can stay, Margaret nodded and immediately added. But remember, we have our own rules in the house. Dinner is at 6 in the evening. After 10, everyone needs to sit quietly. Grandma should rest. And in general, we don't like noise. And I advise you not to leave a mess in either the kitchen or the bathroom. Yes, Mom, we understand, Jake responded, trying not to get annoyed. And don't let Liam spread food all over the house like so many kids do. We have cleanliness here, Edna added. Katie shuddered internally. Her son is only 1.5 years old. He is just learning to hold a spoon correctly. But she didn't argue now. Jake's room was dusty. The window had not been opened for a long time. The first thing they did was let in fresh air. Liam, looking around the new space with curiosity, reached for the old closet. Careful, baby, Katie said, afraid the closet door might fall on his head. Jake tiredly sank onto the bed, which creaked pitifully. Well, what do you say? What will I say? It won't be easy for us, she admitted honestly, carefully packing her things. We'll manage, he answered, trying to smile, but there was excitement in his voice. Thank you for putting up with all this. Katie just shrugged. She understood that blaming him for the current situation was stupid, but her heart sank at the thought that she would now have to live with two elderly women who, apparently, were quite aggressive. Already in the first week, it became clear that life in this house would be different from usual. Margaret got up very early, at 5 or 6 in the morning, to prepare breakfast and fill the day with endless small chores. Edna either complained about pain in her legs or began to grumble about how everything was better in her youth. Katie tried to help, but every time she took on something, she received criticism in response. "Katie, why are you cutting potatoes like that? It needs to be smaller." "But I always cut potatoes like this. It's normal." "No, it's not normal. In our house, everything is done my way." Or, "Can't you see that the floor is dirty? It's our custom to wash the floors every day." "Okay, I'll wash it. It's just that Liam just spilled some juice, so I got busy." All excuses. We must do it right away. Jake often left for work early and returned late, so the brunt of dealing with Margaret and Edna fell on Katie's shoulders. At the same time, Liam, left without his usual walks in familiar places, began to be capricious. There was no corner in the house where he could safely play without running into something fragile or sharp. One afternoon, while Jake was at a construction site, Katie decided to lay a blanket in the backyard and give Liam a little place to play outside. It seemed like a good idea. The child laughed, tried to crawl, exploring every bush, and Katie could enjoy a rare moment of peace. But half an hour later, Edna jumped out to them. "What are you doing? Do you want your child to be bitten by mosquitoes, or that he might catch a cold on the damp grass? It's sunny and warm here. He's wearing closed clothes. I was sitting next to him." Katie tried to object. "In our time, children grew stronger if they did not sit for a long time on the cold ground. You'd better go into the house. There's no point in sitting around here," said the old woman, turning around and taking with her what little was left of her good mood. In the evening, when Jake returned, Katie plucked up the courage to talk to him. "Jake, I can't stand it. Your grandma can't stand me, always nitpicking about every little thing. She's old, she's just bored, so she comes to everyone with advice," Jake sighed. "But I can't feel calm here. It seems to me that I am like a guest whom no one invited." "I understand." He hugged her while Liam ran around the bed. "Be patient a little, please. I'll try to talk to my mother and grandmother so that they are gentler." However, a conversation with Margaret showed that she did not intend to change her behavior. "Everything in our house follows our rules. If she doesn't like it, let her go back where she came from," she answered coldly. Jake tried to object, but Margaret was adamant. "I sheltered you, that's enough. But I'm not going to rebuild my life for my daughter-in-law, who doesn't even know how to cook soup properly." In those first weeks, Katie really felt like her whole life was going downhill. Quarrels with Jake became more frequent. He was tired at work, she felt bad at home, they both got irritated, and only Liam, carefreely playing with his cars, reminded them of what they were trying for. 2 months have passed. The situation did not improve, but rather got worse. Margaret increasingly made caustic remarks to Katie at every opportunity. "You should learn to bake pies like normal women do," she said after dinner, when Katie left simple sandwiches and salad on the table. Edna urged, "In our time, a girl already knew how to run a house at 16, and now they're stealing ready-made products from the store." Katie learned to grit her teeth and walk away silently so as not to make a scandal, but irritation grew inside her. She began to increasingly avoid communication, locking herself in a room with Liam, trying to look for work online. However, there were few vacancies in their small town, and she still could not send Liam to kindergarten because there was no money for it, and she was afraid to leave him with Edna. She herself walked with a cane. She could drop the child or not keep track of him. At such moments, Jake felt that he was losing touch with his wife. He tries to earn money and takes on additional part-time work. He returns late and is met at home by a tired, angry Katie. "Why can't you somehow protect me from your mother?" she asked. "I'm trying honestly," he justified himself, But Kat, they still sheltered us. I can't directly tell them what to do. And then, we are now penniless. This does not give us the right to dictate terms. So you can mock me, right? Jake sighed heavily and sat down on a chair. Understand, I don't want to quarrel with my mother and grandmother. They raised me. And now I feel torn between them and you. And I just can't find a compromise. Katie understood that his position was also difficult, but she became increasingly bitter. The love with which she was full, once seemed boundless, now seemed to be collapsing due to everyday life and lack of support. She increasingly thought that if this continued, their marriage would not survive. Sometimes acquaintances visited them, bringing news from the outside world. Steve, Jake's friend, the one who organized their first meeting, came into the Sunday and saw how tense the atmosphere was. "Hey guys, why are you so gloomy? Liam is cheerful, jumping around. Let's smile a little too," he tried to joke. But Margaret immediately intervened. If he hadn't grown up without a father all day long, you see, he wouldn't have been so wild. Jake is always at work, but his mother can't really raise him. Steve was stunned into silence, and Katie simply turned away so as not to start screaming. The evening was ruined. The next day, when things had calmed down, Jake and Katie were sitting in their room, putting Liam to bed. The boy was capricious. He didn't want to go to bed. He tossed around, asking to read a fairy tale, which was always read in their former apartment. But the books remained in some boxes, and some of the things were still lying somewhere on the mezzanine. Finally, having rocked the child to sleep, they were left alone. "Kat, I was thinking that if it's so unbearable here, maybe I should change jobs. Try to go to a big city, to the north, or where they pay more," Jake suggested. "But then we'll be apart, right?" she clarified. "Yes, you'll have to. Live separately for some time. I can send money. In the meantime, you stay here with Liam. Well, or if you can, you'll find where to rent an apartment. But I'm afraid it's expensive." Katie sighed. The thought of being left with Margaret and Edna without Jake made her shudder. And yet, maybe this is better than all this endless struggle. "How quickly can you find such a job?" she asked doubtfully. "Don't know. The competition there is fierce. You have to pay for travel and housing in a new place. It's not a fact that they'll hire me right away because I'm an ordinary worker without a higher education, and I don't have much experience other than construction." And then, that same evening, the thought of contract military service first occurred to Jake. He had previously heard from an acquaintance that employees were paid consistently, given social guarantees, and after a certain period of time they could apply for some benefits, including housing. This idea seemed crazy at first glance because he was never particularly eager to join the army. But faced with a dead end, he began to see the idea as a lifeline. However, at that moment he did not dare to tell Katie about this. He only hinted. "There is another option, but I'm not yet sure whether it's worth considering. It is connected with the fact that I will be leaving for several years. More precisely, I can be sent to different units." "For several years?" she asked in surprise. "What kind of option is this?" "Let's discuss it a little later. I don't really know the details myself," he dodged, not wanting to burden her with new worries. Already falling asleep, she felt the weight of problems pressing on her chest. And only Liam's quiet breathing nearby calmed me down a little. One day, when Katie was doing her usual work in the garden, the postman came into the yard and handed her an envelope. She saw a familiar name on the envelope, Emily Grayson. It was an old friend of hers from high school who had moved to another state many years ago. They occasionally corresponded, but the last few months the connection was interrupted. Now Emily wrote that she had found a more stable job, working in the tourism industry, and would probably be able to help Katie get settled if she decided to move. Managers were needed there, preferably with experience, but it is possible without the main thing is to learn quickly. Katie's heart began to beat faster. Maybe this is a chance, she thought, having finished reading the letter. She knew that she couldn't leave just like that. She had Liam, her husband, and she needed money for the trip. but some corner of my consciousness was feverishly looking for a way to escape from this darkness. If only everything were simpler. In the evening, when Jake returned, she showed him the letter. Look, Emily is calling me to another state. He says there are prospects of finding a job in the office of a travel agency. I studied to be a manager. This might come in handy. Jake read the letter carefully and scratched the back of his head. Sounds interesting. But how do we get there? We have almost nothing in our pocket, and the road is not close. You will have to rent an apartment there. Understand? I understand, Katie answered gloomily. But I can no longer sit here in this house. Sometimes it seems to me that if I don't break out then. I don't want to lose you, he suddenly said, looking into her eyes. She felt something tremble inside. I remembered how he was when they first met. Confident, cheerful, ready to move mountains. Now he himself looks depressed, as if driven into a corner. Jake, I don't want us to break up either, but I can't stand another year or more under the same roof with your mother if nothing changes. But we have neither money nor stability. Jake sighed heavily, as if daring to say what had been tormenting him in recent days. Listen, I made some inquiries about contract service. They pay, not bad, and for length of service, they can give you a housing subsidy. This is not so fast, of course. It usually needs to last from 3 to 5 years. But this is a real opportunity to save up. Katie was dumbfounded. Are you serious? Army? Jake, you never talked about it, and your personality doesn't. Well, I don't know. You don't seem like the kind of person who wants to give orders or follow them without question. He shrugged. Maybe I don't want to, but we're at an impasse. We have no money, and if I join the army, the salary will be stable, plus a social package. You could stay here. Yes, it's hard, but at least we won't be homeless. Mom won't kick you and Liam out. Katie took a deep breath. Do you understand that then we will be apart? Liam will grow up without his father around. I can't stand this. But it's better than rotting here and quarreling every day. I want to give you and your son a normal life. Maybe while I serve, you will somehow find a job. And when the contract ends, we can start all over again. The conversation lasted until late at night. They weighed the pros and cons, but neither option seemed ideal. Moving in with Emily, we need a lot of money. Stay here, constant swearing. Army, many years of separation. Ultimately, they decided that Jake would gather more information about the contract and then make a final decision. However, a premonition was already brewing inside Katie. Sooner or later, he would take this step, and she didn't know if she was ready for this. A couple of days after that conversation, Katie had another conflict with Margaret, this time over money. Grandma Edna always distracted Katie with her errands, and she didn't have time to go to the store, and Margaret strictly monitored the products, counting every cent, and was sure that Katie was wasting money left and right. When Katie said after dinner that she needed to go to the store to buy bread, vegetables, and some things for dinner, Margaret became furious. What do you need again? You already asked for money for groceries yesterday. Can't you save money? We ate everything. There was very little bread left, and vegetables too at the end. Katie began to justify herself. Have you eaten? Are you eating excessively? Can't you get by with little? In our time, when I was your age, we lived for weeks on the same soup and did not complain. Katie clenched her fists, trying to remain calm. Sorry, but we need to eat, and Liam needs fresh food too. He's a child, he can't have just pasta. I can go myself, but I don't have money. I would buy them if I had them. So make money, why are you sitting on my neck? Margaret almost shouted. At that moment Jake entered, returning a little earlier than usual. Mom, calm down. We won't sit on your neck, I'm trying. Are you trying? Yes, I see how hard you are trying. You bring 2 pennies into the house, but you have to feed 2 mouths. And she also goes grocery shopping every day. Margaret continued to be angry, pointing at Katie. That's enough, Jake said quietly but firmly. It's not normal that we talk like this. I already said that I'm looking for a way out. If necessary, I will go into the army, then I will have a stable income. But stop blaming Katie for everything. So go, he did not expect such a reaction from his mother. Join your army, let's see how it works out for you. Then your Katie will stay here with me and Grandma. Let's see how they get along without you. Just don't complain later if your son doesn't recognize you. These words sounded very cruel and hurt Jake, but at the same time they pushed him to a final decision. He realized that there was no point in waiting for a miracle. Here, in his hometown, he earned pennies and depended on his mother. He wanted to become the master of his life. Seeing the despair on her husband's face, Katie felt that the end was near. She herself was ready to beg him to leave and get them out of this swamp, no matter how terrible the separation was. Another couple of weeks passed. Jake put his documents in order, went to the city for interviews at the military registration and enlistment office, talked with Army representatives, and learned details about contract service. Each time he returned silent and confused, but his determination grew inside him. At this time, Katie tried not to attract too much attention from Margaret and Edna and silently did all the housework. Liam grew up, learned to say new words, sometimes amusingly distorted the names of his grandparents, although he never saw his grandfather. Jake's father died when he was 7 years old. But this is a separate sad story which was rarely and reluctantly remembered in the house. One evening, when dinner was almost over, Jake announced that he only had to pass a few medical examinations, and then he would be able to sign a contract for 5 years. 5 years? Margaret could not resist, jumping up from the table. Are you crazy? Mom, I have already made a decision. 5 years means a good salary and an opportunity for career growth. During this time, I will be able to save up for housing for my family, he answered harshly, looking down at her. She wrinkled her face as if she had suddenly aged several years. Consider that you are leaving me and your home. If you have already decided, do as you please. But don't think that I will beg you to stay. Katie sat quietly. She was partly glad that they had a chance for salvation, but her heart sank. 5 years is too long a period of separation, and Liam is only 2. That evening, she had disturbing dreams in which Jake was leaving for distant lands, and she could never reach him. A month later, all formalities were settled. Jake was assigned to one of the bases located in another state. He was required to arrive there within 2 weeks. The goodbye was tense. Margaret did not shed a tear. She only stated dryly, "Well, goodbye, son. I hope you know what you're doing." Edna sat silently in a chair, looking out the window. There was something like stubborn bitterness in her gaze. She understood that her grandson was leaving, and now only the female kingdom would remain in the house, in which there was really no harmony. When the day of departure arrived, everyone gathered on the porch. Jake with a suitcase, Katie with Liam in her arms, Margaret and Edna a couple of steps behind. It was a gray, rainy day, as if the heavens were also crying for this family. Jake hugged his son and pulled him close. The boy did not understand anything, dangled his legs, and tried to grab his father's collar. "Don't forget to call, okay?" Katie asked, feeling that her voice was trembling. "We will wait. Promise you'll come back." "I promise," he replied, brushing a stray strand of hair from her forehead and trying to smile. Margaret crossed her arms. "Go already, before you change your mind." These words sounded almost like a provocation, but Jake did not give in. He knew there was no turning back, and just like that, under the drizzle of rain, silently, he got into the taxi that took him to the station. Katie couldn't even say goodbye as she wanted because everything happened too quickly and nervously. When the taxi left, she felt as if half of her soul had been ripped out. Now she is left alone with her son in this house, where every corner is saturated with unlove and the future is gloomy. But she had one last hope, that Jake's efforts would not be in vain, that in 5 years or sooner, if they were lucky, they would be able to start life anew. The days without Jake dragged on painfully long. Liam turned 3 years old, and he increasingly asked, "Where is Daddy? When will he come?" To which Katie answered evasively, "He's at work, far away, but he'll come to visit soon. She herself did not know how soon her husband would be able to get leave, because he had just started his service. Margaret continued to find fault with every little thing. It seemed that the absence of her son only increased her irritation. Now there is no one nearby who could soften the situation. Edna wasn't getting any less grumpy either. But there was more female company in the house. The neighbor Mrs. Wood, who was as old as the hills and loved to spread gossip, and sometimes give advice that looked more like moral teaching, would periodically come by. Katie tried to limit communication. She cooked, cleaned, fed Liam, played with him, and during his nap, she quietly sat down at the computer. She had an old laptop that more or less still worked and tried to find remote work. But I found only low-paying options, for example, typing for nominal money. She took on everything that came her way in order to have at least a little of her own penny for small needs, without begging for them from Margaret. In the first months, a couple of transfers came from Jake. Not too much, because part of the money was kept for military expenses and uniforms, but still something. Having received the first transfer, Katie felt tears welling up in her eyes. It was a letter in which he wrote that everything was fine with him, but the training was hard, the discipline was strict. He misses him very much. "Sorry I can't call as often," Jake wrote. "Sometimes we don't have access to phones when we're doing exercises. I hope you're hanging in there. Hugs to you and your son." She clutched the letter to her chest. "Jake, you are our savior," she thought. But joy was mixed with despair. After all, he was not around, and this made it even more bitter. After 3 months of Jake's service at the military base, he had his first more or less lengthy telephone conversation. He called in the evening when, by luck, everyone was at home. Katie, hearing a familiar voice, felt her heart beating at a frantic rhythm. "Jake, God, how I miss you," she exclaimed, forgetting all her problems for a moment. Liam, hearing his dad's name, also smiled, tried to grab the phone and said, "Dad, Dad, I miss you." "I miss you too, buddy." Jake's warm voice was heard. "Tell me, how are you doing?" The kid started chattering about some of his games, about a new toy car that Katie managed to buy with a modest fee. Jake listened with pleasure, but not for long. A couple of minutes later, Margaret answered the phone. "Son, how are you doing? I hope you don't forget about us." Jake sighed into the phone. "Of course, I don't forget, Mom. I'm transferring money to you." "Yes, transfers are coming, but they are small," she said. "We have to save money and your wife." There was a familiar note of dissatisfaction in the voice. Katie tensed, pressing the phone to her ear. "Mom, let's not complain, okay?" Jake stopped her. "I do what I can, and Katie is trying too." "Oh, son, if only she tried as hard as she should." Katie felt her patience running out. She decided to intervene. "Margaret, can I talk to Jake? We haven't talked for a long time." But the mother-in-law was in no hurry to give up the phone. She complained for a couple of minutes that Liam was too noisy, that there was too much to do around the house, and that Katie supposedly didn't have time to do everything perfectly. Jake listened to this in silence, only occasionally inserting "Mom" with a reproachful intonation. When the phone eventually returned to Katie, all she heard was, "I'm running out of call time here, Kat. Sorry, we'll have to chat next time." "Wait, Jake, But short beeps sounded in response. The connection was interrupted. It was a shame to the point of tears. For the first time in several months, she could vent to her loved one, but in reality, she received only a bunch of complaints from her mother-in-law. In the evening, when Liam fell asleep, he and Margaret had a tough conversation. "Why are you doing this? This was my only chance to talk to Jake," Katie blurted out, unable to contain herself. "Why shouldn't I talk to my son? Who are you anyway? This is my home, my son. Don't forget about it," she snapped. "I am his wife, and he misses me, you know." "Oh, that's how it is." Margaret grinned. "He misses you. Are you sure that he misses you? Maybe he just feels sorry for the boy." The word sounded like an insult, calling into question Katie's entire value in Jake's life. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she only said one thing. "You are unfair," and went to her room, slamming the door. Every day without Jake became a new challenge for Katie. She was afraid to admit it to herself, but she began to think, or maybe it would be better to go to Emily, even if there is not enough money. But then she will have neither family support nor the opportunity to receive transfers from Jake, because she will not even be able to tell him a new address if he is constantly traveling. And what to do with Liam, who is already accustomed to this house, although not the most welcoming one. Sometimes in the evenings, when Margaret and Edna were sitting at the TV watching some series, Katie would retire on the second floor and pull out rare photographs from an old chest of drawers, where she and Jake were still young, in love, happy. In one, they are together on the shore of the lake, where they spent the weekend immediately after the wedding. Jake laughs, hugs her shoulders, and Katie has an ear-to-ear smile on her face. How long ago was it? Or does it seem like it was yesterday? She thought, leafing through the memories. But so much happened in this short period. One day, when her heart was especially heavy, she tried to write a letter to Jake. She sat down at the table and took a sheet of paper. Writing by hand seemed more sincere than typing on a computer. At first the words didn't come, she just cried, looking at the blank sheet. Then she began, "Dear Jake, I know you are very busy, but I need to speak out." And then came the lines about how she dreams of them reuniting soon, how painful it is for her to live in this house, where every day is filled with reproaches, how tired she is of feeling like a stranger, unworthy. She cried all night, buried in her pillow, and in the morning she carefully put the letter in an envelope and sent it to the address of the military unit that Jake gave her. "I hope it comes through," she thought. "Maybe he'll write back or call." But the answer did not come immediately and could not come quickly. Their mail there worked intermittently, and all these days the waiting was eating away at my soul. One afternoon, while Katie was mopping the hallway floor, Grandma Edna called her into her room. It was an old storage room converted into a bedroom, so Edna wouldn't have to climb the stairs to the second floor. The room smelled of some herbal ointments and old things. The shelf above the bed was lined with photographs of Edna as a young woman, black and white photographs of her late husband, and next to it a portrait of young Jake. "Close the door," Edna asked when Katie entered. "I need to talk to you without unnecessary ears." "Did something happen?" Katie asked warily, looking around. "Sit down." The old woman pointed to a low stool. She sat down on the bed, holding on to the wooden armrest. "I know it's not easy for you here," she said, carefully peering into Katie's face. "Yes," the girl breathed, "and you don't make my life any easier either." Edna narrowed her eyes, but did not object. "Maybe I'm grumbling, but believe me, I've seen a lot. If my husband had not been in the military, we would not have been able to rebuild this house. He served for 20 years, and our family had stability, and Margaret grew up in prosperity without knowing the need. Now look what it's all become." She ran her hand along the frayed edges of the coverlet, as if trying to touch the past. "Are you saying that you support Jake in his decision to join the army?" Katie clarified. "Perhaps," Edna nodded. "He followed in his grandfather's footsteps. I didn't tell you, my husband was an officer who died in the line of duty when Jake was only 5. Oh, it's a hard life when a man serves. But the family receives benefits and sometimes housing. Really, can you wait for him?" This question sounded like a challenge. "Can you?" I I don't know, Grandma Edna. I want to wait. I love him. It's just unbearable to live here when no one supports me. Margaret. Margaret is as stubborn as a sheep and is very offended by life. Her husband died early, her son is now gone, and here you are with your child. It seems to her that everything is on her. "But I'm doing everything I can," Katie objected. "You do. I see," Edna lowered her eyes. "But you're in her house, and it annoys her because it reminds her that her life isn't going well either. She did not remarry, did not start a happy family, and then the son got married, brought his daughter-in-law, and even turned out to be unable to support himself and his family separately. This is a humiliation for her." There was silence in the room. It was the first time Katie had heard someone describe Margaret's inner feelings. Maybe the mother-in-law is really unhappy in her own way, but does this justify her harshness? Listen, girl, Edna continued, I'm not saying you have to stay here forever, but until nothing changes, you will have to endure. Try not to argue with her again. Do you think I like swearing every day? No, but I'm already old, and I don't want Jake to come back and find his wife crushed or left by him. Children should grow up with their father. So what do you propose? Katie asked, confused. Just talk like a human being without shouting. I see what kind of couple you are. You are young, you need a different space. Maybe in time you will find a way out. In the meantime, try to control yourself, don't provoke Margaret, and perhaps she will soften. Katie didn't know what to answer, because she was already having difficulty controlling herself. But for the first time, if not kindness, then at least some reasonableness was heard in Edna's voice. Leaving the room, she felt maybe her grandmother was not so opposed to her. It's just difficult for her due to her age and life experience. A week after this conversation, Katie waited for an answer to her letter. It came on the very day when she already thought that Jake would not read her frank confessions. The envelope was pretty wrinkled, the stamps were illegible, but the address matched it came from him. Holding her breath, she opened the letter and began to read. Dear Katie, sorry for not answering for so long. I received your letter when I returned from training. Believe me, I am very sorry that I cannot support you by your side. I understand how difficult it is for you with your mother and grandmother. But please don't forget that all this is for the sake of our future. It's not all honey here. A strict schedule, hard training, officers who don't let you relax even for a minute. But I keep telling myself that this is necessary for you and Liam to have a chance at a normal life. I miss you both very much. I see dreams where we are together again in our small apartment. I hear Liam's laughter. I understand that 5 years is a long time. It may be possible to get a short vacation in a year or a year and a half. I'll come, I promise. And if I serve well, perhaps I will be transferred to a unit closer to our state, and then it will be easier to see each other. Kat, most importantly, don't break yourself there. If you really can't bear it, look for options. Maybe rent a room in the city, maybe with friends. I will send the money. Yes, Mom, of course, is not the easiest person, but if you can tolerate her, we will come out of this crisis stronger than we were. Love you. Hugs to Liam. Hold on, dear. Yours, Jake. Reading these lines, Katie burst into tears. They felt sincerity and pain. He didn't want her to ruin her life. He didn't understand how serious everything was in the house. But he, too, suffered from alienation from his family. She hid the letter in the safe, where important documents lay, with the feeling that she was not alone. He may be far away, but he thinks about her. Time passed, and then one day Katie received an invitation to a wedding from an old friend, Sarah, who lived on the other side of the city. Sarah turned 25 and was marrying a young entrepreneur. At first, Katie didn't want to go. Thoughts of holidays in this state seemed absurd to her. But Margaret unexpectedly showed generosity. Go, unwind. Otherwise you walk around here darker than a cloud. I'll sit with Liam, she said, looking like she was doing a huge favor. Katie was surprised, but decided not to refuse. If her mother-in-law herself offers, she should take the opportunity to get out of the house. And then, she hasn't seen Sarah for a long time, and Liam will have the opportunity to be with his grandmother. What if this will benefit both of them? The wedding was quite noisy and fun, as always happens in small towns when everyone has known each other since childhood. An orchestra was playing, young people were singing karaoke, and there were tables with snacks and drinks everywhere. Katie appeared there in a modest blue dress, which miraculously survived from the old days when she and Jake were freer financially. It was unusual for her to feel smiles and congratulations. Oh, Katie, glad to see you. How's Liam? Where is your husband? Jake serves, she answered, trying not to go into details. After drinking a little wine, Katie felt slightly relaxed. She was dancing with her friends, laughing at jokes, when suddenly a guy she had not seen before approached her. Tall, with a charming smile, he called himself David. It turned out that he was a friend of the groom. A light conversation ensued. "Hello, you're probably Sarah's friend. I'm David. They told me you're here alone. Maybe you can keep me company." "Oh, hi, David. Yes, I'm Katie. True, I came without my husband because he was away. For work," she added, shrugging her shoulders. "It's a pity," David smiled. "But maybe that won't stop us from having a drink together." He offered a glass of wine, and Katie, after hesitating, agreed. Embarrassment fought with the desire to simply chat with someone pleasant. She explained that she had a small son and that her husband was far away, but did not go into details. She was simply interested in feeling like a living young woman and not a driven housewife under constant pressure from her mother-in-law. The very atmosphere of the wedding was conducive to communication. Later, when everyone was gathered on the dance floor, David approached her again. "Shall we dance?" "I haven't danced for a long time," she admitted. "Nothing, I'm not a professional either." They walked into the center and began to move to the unassuming music of a typical wedding band. At first Katie felt awkward, but gradually the wine and the general energy of the holiday relaxed her. David held her hand, looked closely, and sometimes his gaze lingered too long. She felt her mouth go dry and her heart begin to beat faster. This was the moment when the reality of home, conflicts with Margaret, and thoughts of distant Jake for a moment moved into the background. She wanted to allow herself ease, to forget. And although she understood that this was a dangerous path, that night she could not stop. After the wedding, the young people continued the party in a bar nearby. Katie was already quite tipsy, but David did not lag behind, still offering another glass. She was not experienced in drinking, and recently she had not had such outings at all. The music was blaring, the lights were flashing, someone was smoking in the street. Everything was mixed up, as if in a fog. At one point, as the bar began to close, David asked, "Where are you going now? Maybe I can give you a ride." "Home," Katie said in confusion. "You can drop by my place," he suddenly suggested, leaning on the bar counter. "Let's have some tea and talk. I have a small apartment nearby. If you don't want to, I'll understand." She hesitated. Even in a state of intoxication, I understood that this was a very bad idea. She has a husband, albeit far away, but still, she's not like that. But something inside said, "You deserve at least a little happiness and warmth, at least for one evening." This was the decisive moment. They went to see him. David's apartment was spacious. It felt like he was not in poverty. Modern household appliances, a soft sofa, shelves with books. He put water on the tea, but in the end they didn't drink it. Some kind of impulse, the interweaving of emotions, and the alcohol consumed took over. The night flashed by as if in a haze, mixed memories of hot kisses, heavy breathing, fear, and at the same time an acute feeling of freedom from the nightmare of the last months. When she woke up the next morning on someone else's couch, with a headache and the feeling that she had made a terrible mistake, David looked at her gently, but without much affection. "Sorry if something's wrong," he said, smiling. "You just seemed very unhappy to me, and I wanted to please you. I didn't think you'd really make up your mind." Hearing this, she realized how stupid and pathetic her action looked. "How could I give in like that?" she asked herself. She dressed quickly, not accepting his offer to have breakfast. I took a taxi home. A new wave of problems awaited her there. Margaret, of course, was outraged. Katie lied about staying over at a friend's house after the wedding because it was late. But she saw from her mother-in-law's cold gaze that she didn't believe it. And for the first time in her life, Katie felt dirty, ashamed of her actions. She imagined what it would be like if Jake found out. Weeks passed. Katie tried to forget about that night and continued to lead her usual lifestyle. However, after a while, she noticed that her cycle was off. Morning sickness and extreme fatigue developed, even though she was always tired. Doubts grew. Am I really pregnant? She was horrified. Just the thought made my veins freeze. She ended up sneaking a pregnancy test from a pharmacy without Margaret and Edna noticing. I did it in the morning in the bathroom, closing the latch. Two stripes appeared almost immediately. Shock overwhelmed my mind. Oh my God, I'm pregnant. And this is probably from David. There is no other option. What to do? Should I tell Jake? But he will immediately understand that the child is not his because they have not seen each other for many months. Should I tell Margaret? This is completely unthinkable. I ruined my life, thought Katie, sitting on the edge of the bathtub, clutching her head. She was ashamed, scared, disgusted. But the secret could not remain a secret for long. After a couple of weeks, Margaret noticed that Katie often looked bad, sometimes ran out to the toilet, and one day she saw a pregnancy test box that Katie had taken out into the trash can on the street. The scene was stormy. "Are you pregnant?" the mother-in-law blurted out, entering Katie's room without knocking. "No, I." Katie tried to get confused in her words. "Don't lie. I found a test, so it's true." Katie didn't have time to figure it out. "You disgrace me," Margaret hissed. "Scoundrel, I'll call him right now. Let him know who he took as his wife." "Please don't." Katie tried to grab her hand, but Margaret pulled her hand away, jumping out of the room. That same evening, in front of Katie, she dialed Jake's number, and as soon as he picked up, she began. "Jake, this is Mom. Your wife is pregnant. I hope you can count." Katie stood, feeling her knees shaking. She had probably never heard anything more terrible. There was a long pause on the phone, then a heavy sigh was heard. "Why are you silent?" Margaret barked. "Thank you for saying," Jake said barely audibly, and hung up. At that moment, Katie realized that her life was completely falling apart. She wanted to explain everything to her husband herself, but now it's too late. A week has passed. Jake didn't call or text. Katie tormented herself with the thought that he probably hated her now. Margaret and Edna pointedly ignored her and spoke through clenched teeth. Liam felt that something was wrong and was constantly acting up. One evening, the landline phone rang. Picking up the phone, Katie heard an unfamiliar male voice introducing himself as an officer from the unit where Jake served. "Mrs. Catherine Reeves?" "Yes, I." "Katie Reeves is speaking to you," she answered, feeling an unpleasant chill in her chest. "I'm sorry to report. Your husband, Senior Private Jake Reeves, was found in his room today. He passed away." These words hit like an axe. Katie froze, not breathing. Then she screamed. "No, no, this cannot be." The officer continued to say something, but she heard almost nothing. The world was covered with a dark veil. She fell to her knees, her whole body trembling. A few minutes later, Margaret ran into the room. "What's happened?" "Katie," but seeing her face, she quickly came up, took the phone, and asked the officer for details. When she hung up the phone, she looked at Katie with such an expression as if she herself did not believe what had happened. "He died," whispered Katie, feeling her heart breaking. In the next hours, everything happened like in a nightmare. Margaret began to rush around the house, shouting, "My boy, why?" And Edna cried silently in her chair, covering her face with her hands. Katie couldn't even find the strength to cry. It seemed to her that time had stopped, and she was falling into an abyss. The next day, the officer came in person to clarify details, convey condolences, and complete paperwork. From the conversation, it turned out that Jake left a short note, but its contents were not disclosed. Perhaps it was about his wife's betrayal. Katie never found out, but she already understood that the story about pregnancy from another man could be the last straw. Jake's funeral took place a week later. The military ceremony was modest, but no less difficult. Katie didn't know how to look people in the eyes. At the ceremony, she stood slightly to the side with Liam, but Margaret twice gave her looks as if she wanted to kill her with one look. Edna was nearby, head down. When the coffin was lowered into the ground, Katie finally burst into tears, feeling that she was losing not only her husband, but all her hopes. The officer present at the funeral tried to calm her down, but she just shook her head. It seemed to her that everyone was looking at her accusingly. Black clothes, mournful faces, cold glances of the guests who stood around the fresh grave in the cemetery. Those few days after Jake's funeral merged into one endless nightmare for Katie. Her heart ached with grief mixed with guilt and shame. It seemed that the whole world knew about her betrayal, about that night with David, about the pregnancy and termination of the child's life, about how she could not explain to her husband before he decided that dying was the only way out. She understood that it was no longer possible to remain under the same roof with Margaret and Edna. The mother-in-law hardly spoke to Katie after the tragedy. If by chance she met her gaze, then only anger, resentment, and contempt could be read in her eyes. Grandma Edna, who had once been a little more reserved, was now also completely withdrawn, as if all threads of communication had been severed, and only Liam remained an innocent child who asked questions. "Where is Daddy? Why don't we come back here?" But she couldn't find an answer. Having collected modest things, clothes, documents, a few books, her son's favorite toys, Katie knocked on the door of Sarah, her school friend, the same one at whose wedding many months ago she experienced light, albeit false joy. Sarah lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city with her husband Rick. It wasn't easy for Sarah herself, but seeing Katie's suffering, she couldn't refuse. "Even though I don't have much space, I won't leave you on the street," she said, hugging her friend when she crossed the threshold. "We'll put you and Liam in a small room on the second floor. We used to store trash there, but I'll remove everything and make temporary housing." Katie buried her face in Sarah's shoulder and silently sobbed. She was ashamed that she had to rely on the kindness of others, but there was no other way out. Rick, Sarah's husband, although he wasn't thrilled about the extra tenants, didn't argue. He looked at Katie with sympathy, but tried to stay away and not get involved in her personal drama. From that day, a new life began. The room really turned out to be tiny, only a mattress on the floor, a folding bed for Liam, and a narrow chest of drawers could fit in there. The window looked at the neighbor's blank fence, and the wind blew through the loose window frames. But it was her space where she could be alone, not listen to or see anyone. At first, Katie could neither eat nor sleep. When she closed her eyes, she imagined Jake a pale face, an empty look. She knew it was just a figment of her imagination, but the feeling of her late husband's presence did not disappear. Then she was haunted by dreams in which Jake blamed her, reproached her for cheating. At times it seemed like she was going crazy. Sarah tried to calm her friend down, giving her light sedative drops. But the pain did not subside. The hardest part was explaining to Liam that Dad wasn't coming back. "Daddy has flown to heaven," Katie said, kneeling down next to her son and hugging him. At 3.5 years old, he could not fully understand the meaning of death, but he felt the absence of his beloved father. At times he cried at night and called for Dad in his sleep. Then Katie hugged the boy to her, realizing that now she was the only one for him, father and mother at the same time. Several weeks have passed since moving in with Sarah. It was necessary to at least pay for food, help the mistress of the house with utility costs, but Katie had no money. She has lost almost all connections and opportunities. Moreover, after the story of pregnancy from another man, her reputation suffered greatly. Few people wanted to hire a woman with such a dark history, especially since she was the widow of a military man who took his own life. But Katie understood that she could not give up. And for myself, and most importantly for Liam, she began sending out resumes wherever she could. I went to companies, shops, even bars, offering my services. However, she did not have a higher education diploma, only a certificate of completion of management courses and some experience working in a supermarket before the birth of her son. The response she often heard was, "Sorry, we don't have any open positions," or "We need someone with no family commitments who is willing to work a flexible schedule." Some directly hinted, "We heard about your situation. Maybe you should do something else." These words hurt the ears. In small towns, evil tongues love to discuss other people's grief, attribute non-existent details, and build theories. One day, Katie tried to get a job as a secretary in a small real estate agency. The owner, a man of about 50 at first, seemed to agree, but then began asking her about her family, about how she was left alone. He said interesting things. You understand, people don't like it when a secretary has a scandalous reputation. Katie left with her head raised proudly, but at home she still burst into tears. She remembered what she was like before, a naive girl, sincerely in love with Jake, dreaming of a family, of quiet happiness, and I couldn't believe that now she was a woman with a scandal, the culprit of the tragedy, the one who betrayed her husband. The feeling of guilt smoldered inside like coal and burned her soul, and yet she continued to search. Day after day, week after week. Sarah, seeing her friend's condition, tried to help morally. After work, she would go into a small room, bring tea or fresh fruit, and they would talk for a long time in whispers so as not to wake the children. Rick had already come to terms with the fact that Katie and Liam were living with them, although he sometimes hinted, "Listen, Sarah, maybe you can find something specific for her so that she can move in faster. We have a second child soon, we don't have much space." Sarah nodded and explained to her husband that Katie had nowhere to go, that she couldn't be abandoned now. Realizing that her time as a guest could not last forever, Katie tried to help around the house. When Sarah was pregnant, Katie did the cooking, cleaning, and grocery shopping. "Katie, how are you holding up?" Sarah asked one day when they were drinking tea together in the kitchen. "Sorry that I don't ask often. I'm just afraid to touch on a sore subject." "I'm trying to hold on for Liam," Katie answered, leaning her elbows on the table. "Sometimes it seems to me that if it weren't for my son, I wouldn't be able to stand it all myself. But when I look at him, I understand. I must become for him that person who will not break, will not leave him. He doesn't have a father anyway." "You're a good mom," Sarah said softly. "Life just hurts sometimes. But that doesn't mean you can't be supported." Katie wiped away a tear, looking at her friend gratefully. "Thank you for sheltering me. I'm looking for a job, I really am. I promise that as soon as I find it, I will rent even a room, but my own. I don't want to be a burden to you and Rick." Sarah nodded and squeezed her friend's hand. "Just please, don't blame yourself forever. Jake, no one can know why a person did what he did. Perhaps he had his own inner demons. Yes, your mistake was serious, but—" She didn't finish because she saw Katie's eyes filling with tears. The topic of guilt for the death of her husband remained the most painful. Katie, despite her friend's sympathy, did not accept excuses. Confidence lived in her mind. "My betrayal was the last straw. I ruined our lives and killed him with my infidelity." Autumn has come. Yellow leaves covered the streets, and a cool wind blew scraps of newspaper along the sidewalks. Katie, as usual, left early to take Liam to a small group at a local social center. They looked after the children of single mothers for free for several hours a day, which made it possible for mothers to look for work or earn extra money. Liam smiled as they reached a familiar building with a peeling blue door. He felt that his mother wanted the best for him and stopped crying when they parted. Katie, leaving her son, went outside and noticed an advertisement on the board. An assistant wanted for a flower shop. Flexible schedule, on-site training possible. My heart skipped a beat. This is at least something. She quickly wrote down the phone number from the ad, deciding to call immediately. A female voice answered on the other end. "Hello, Hannah Spring. I'm listening to you." "Good afternoon. My name is Katie. I saw your advertisement for a job in a flower shop. Tell me, is the vacancy still relevant?" "Quite. Can you come in for an interview today? I hope you have an address." Katie felt a long-forgotten feeling of excitement awakening inside her. Hope. Before this, she had received refusals everywhere, but now the employer doesn't ask too much and invites her for an interview. Half an hour later, she stood at the small window of the Spring Petals flower shop, located on a busy street. Behind the glass, one could see pots with ficuses and cacti, shelves with bouquets of roses, chrysanthemums, and gerberas. As soon as Katie entered, the aroma of fresh flowers and notes of moistened earth hit her nose. Behind the counter stood a short woman with short hair and lively eyes. "Hello, I'm Hannah, and you're probably Katie," she asked affably. "Yes, it's me," she smiled. Thank you for taking the time to see me. Hannah nodded, looking her guest up and down. Her gaze was appraising, but without a hint of condemnation or contempt. So, what can you do? Have you ever worked with flowers? Katie admitted that she does not have any special experience as a florist, but she is ready to learn. I have good taste, I love flowers, I can quickly learn the rules of care, and I will learn how to make bouquets. I know how to work with clients because I have already dealt with trade. Hannah shook her head thoughtfully. Sounds good. I admit, I need a person more likely to help in the store, packing bouquets and simple things. I do the purchasing and complex compositions myself. The schedule is on weekdays until 4, sometimes half a day on weekends. Is it right for you? Hearing this, Katie felt a thrill of joy. Such a schedule was quite compatible with the need to pick up Liam from the social center. She nodded enthusiastically. Yes, yes, I'm just looking for a flexible schedule. I have a small son. I will try very hard. And Hannah, squinting one eye, replied, Well, let's try. Our salary is not big, but stable, plus sometimes we get tips from clients. Can you start tomorrow? Katie exhaled. Yes, of course. Thank you so much. This is how she got her first job after all the misfortunes. As she left the shop, Katie couldn't help but smile. My soul became warmer. Are you really lucky in some way? The next morning, Katie came to the store when the sun was just beginning to gild the tops of the houses. Hannah was already there, busy with the delivery of fresh flowers. The cold storage, where humidity was maintained, was filled with boxes of roses, lilies, tulips. All this had to be carefully laid out and sorted. Okay, Katie, first task. Here are some gloves and scissors. We will cut the stems and place the flowers in water with a nutrient mixture. I'll show you how to make an oblique cut correctly so that the flower lasts longer, Hannah instructed, cheerfully cutting off the ends of the stems herself. Katie threw herself into her work. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the fresh smell of greenery, cool water, and the smooth movements of the scissors, all this seemed to hypnotize, allowing me to escape from gloomy thoughts. It turned out that physical labor with flowers can have something healing and calming in it. At the same time, she learned to distinguish varieties of roses, Grand Prix, Red Naomi, Aqua, and others. Hannah was happy to explain which lily was Oriental and which was Asian. Katie remembered and tried to keep in mind the names, watering rules, and storage tips. When customers arrived, Hannah allowed Katie to watch the order being processed. I want a bouquet for my wife. It's our anniversary. Something bright, but not too pretentious, said the man in the suit. Hannah deftly selected chrysanthemums, gerberas, added a branch of eucalyptus, and pastel-colored wrapping paper. Katie looked and tried to remember the principles of combining textures and shades. Within a few days, she became involved in this small world of floristry. By evening, my legs were buzzing, my shoulders were aching, but my soul was in a state of quiet satisfaction. She does something useful, she gets paid, albeit a little, but honestly earned money. And most importantly, she stopped constantly thinking about her guilt, about what people would say. Hannah sometimes asked questions about the family, but carefully, without intrusiveness. Seeing the sadness in Katie's eyes, she didn't go any further. They felt comfortable together. The employer valued neatness and punctuality, and Katie thanked God for finding such a friendly person. With each week of work in the flower shop, Katie received a modest but stable salary. She decided that she would save the bulk of it and live very frugally with the remaining money. Sarah understood her desire to move out because she herself was in the last month of pregnancy. Their house was becoming too small. Katie spent entire evenings reviewing advertisements for rooms and studios for rent. The prices were biting, but she was helped by what she now had, although not huge, but official income, and, if desired, could prove solvency. However, no one wanted to rent out housing without a down payment and a deposit. Then Hannah, having learned about the problem, offered to help. I have a friend, an aunt, who would rent you a small outbuilding in the yard for symbolic money. It's simple, but clean and secluded. Do you want me to find out? Katie nearly cried with gratitude. A week later, they went to see this aunt, an elderly woman named Mrs. Rose. Her yard was really large, with a garden and a tiny wooden outbuilding where a gardener once lived. Inside there is one room and a tiny kitchen, an outdoor shower, a semi-combined toilet, but everything is in decent condition. If you're not too scared to live here with a child, Mrs. Rose shrugged, then pay me a small amount a month and take care of the garden. It's hard for me. I walk on a stick. You will receive half the rent in exchange for your help. And to be honest, I don't usually rent out an outhouse, but Hannah vouched for you. Katie looked at Liam, who was running around the yard, looking with delight at the grass and bushes with berries. My son liked this place, and it seemed to her that this was a real salvation after months of torment. Yes, the amenities are minimal, but freedom. No neighbors, no strangers' sidelong glances. She agreed without hesitation. She made a deposit from her modest savings, and at the same time agreed that she would help Mrs. Rose with the housework. Upon returning home, Katie told Sarah that she would soon move, and she was happy for her friend. "You're doing great. You finally have your own roof over your head." Getting ready for the evening, Katie looked at Liam, who was already dozing. "You and I are starting from scratch, right, baby?" she whispered, and for the first time in many months, I felt an inner glimmer of light. The move took place at the end of autumn. The outbuilding that Katie rented was simple to the point of austerity: creaky wooden floors, an old bed with a sagging mattress, one table, and a couple of chairs. The kitchen consisted of a small table with a sink and a primitive two-burner gas stove. The shower in the yard was more or less clean, but in winter you had to use it with ingenuity, heating the water in advance. However, Katie had a strange joy inside her. Here she did not have a mother-in-law who would reprimand at the slightest noise. There were no curious neighbors gossiping about why the war widow was living with a strange man. She was her own boss. Liam also saw it as an adventure. "Mom, we're at the house. It's so cool here. Look, we have a separate courtyard." Mrs. Rose turned out to be good-natured, if a little strict. She lived in a large house opposite and was rarely in the outbuilding except to drop in to talk or ask for help in the garden. Katie willingly performed the agreed duties, weeded the beds, trimmed the bushes, collected fallen leaves. For this, the landlady reduced the rent, helping Katie save money. This is how their quiet everyday life began. In the morning, Katie woke up Liam, prepared a modest breakfast porridge or an omelet, took her son to a social group, and she went to work in a flower shop. In the evening, when she returned, they cooked dinner together. Then Liam played in the yard or watched children's books. They didn't have a TV, and they didn't have enough money for it. Entertainment includes ball games, pencil drawings, and songs. When it was time for bed, Liam would climb onto his mother's bed, snuggle, and listen to her whispering a story to him. Sometimes Katie remembered how many years ago she read fairy tales in a cramped apartment with Jake. Her heart ached in pain, but she learned this pain doesn't let it out as fiercely as ever. She had a goal: to raise her son, give him everything she could, and not let her own demons ruin his childhood. A year has passed since the death of my husband. This difficult date was approaching. Katie felt in advance that it would not be easy for her that day. She remembered the funeral, the cold autumn rain, a couple of military men who saluted in honor of a fallen colleague, and the hopelessness when she learned of his death. On the eve of the anniversary, she gathered her courage and arrived at the cemetery. She left Liam with Sarah, not wanting to take the child to this place. She placed a bouquet of lilies at Jake's grave, fresh and bright white. She knelt down and ran her hand over the cold slab with her husband's name on it. "Hey, Jake," she whispered, "I don't know if you can hear me. I'm so guilty." There were tears in his voice. Even though a year had already passed, the guilt was still strong, like mold engulfing the soul. "I wanted to say that Liam has grown up. He often remembers you, albeit vaguely. I showed him your photos. I'm sorry that I couldn't give him a full-fledged family. I'm sorry that I stumbled." She almost shouted the last words. No one answered her. Only the wind rustled the fallen leaves. On her knees, she burst into tears. and suddenly she felt as if a light breath had touched her cheek, like a caress or like a fleeting reproach. A thought flashed through my mind. He left, and nothing will change that. I have to move on with my life. Not for myself, but for Liam. When she wiped away her tears and stood up, her soul was heavy, but without that unbearable hysteria. It was as if through this grief she was learning, step by step, to let go of the past, although she could not and did not want to completely forget it. At the flower shop, Katie has already become an indispensable assistant. Hannah taught her not only how to trim stems and put flowers in water, but also the basics of arranging bouquets and working with decor, weaving wreaths and making wedding arrangements. Sometimes, seeing the hard work of her subordinate, Hannah trusted her to take orders. "Katie, it's wedding season," Hannah said one day. "There are many clients. Everyone needs bouquets, arches, decorations for the hall. Aren't you afraid to take on some of the orders? I will control you, but still." Katie smiled. "No, I'm not afraid. Thank you for trusting me." And indeed, thanks to her efforts, accuracy, and friendly communication with clients, visitors fell in love with Katie. Some asked her to make bouquets for them. Hannah noticed that with the arrival of Katie, her revenue increased because people liked the friendly service. Therefore, 6 months after getting a job, Katie began to receive a slightly higher salary and sometimes small bonuses. Now she could save more. Although the outbuilding was modest, the payment was symbolic. Plus, Katie bought food sparingly, using her budget planning skills. Sometimes I bought Liam cheap but cute toys and books. Seeing how her son's eyes were burning, she felt grateful to fate that at least this child was smiling and not thinking about the past. Sometimes Katie crossed paths with people from her past life, and it was always painful. One day she froze in place when she saw Margaret in the supermarket. The mother-in-law seemed to have aged 10 years, her hair was gray, her gaze was heavy and tired. There is a sharp wrinkle on his face, and he is holding a basket of groceries in his hands. Grandmother Edna stood nearby, leaning on a cane. Katie didn't have time to dodge or hide. Margaret noticed her too, stopped and squinted. The women looked at each other for several long seconds. Katie noticed that her mother-in-law's gaze no longer radiated rage, but rather bitter fatigue. "Hello," Katie squeezed out, squeezing the handle of the cart. My heart was pounding like a drum in my chest. "Hello," Margaret answered dryly, making an effort not to look away. "How is your son?" She didn't say the name Liam, as if she was afraid or didn't want to even say it. Katie, feeling a lump in her throat, still tried to speak calmly. "He is growing. He is already 4, soon to be 5. He goes to the group and studies healthy." Margaret nodded silently. Edna stood nearby, looking at the products on the shelf, as if she didn't want to interfere. Something like regret flashed in her eyes, too. "That's good," answered the mother-in-law. Well, take care of him." She didn't say anything else. She just turned around and walked on. Katie stood there trying to calm her breathing. There were no curses, no scandal, but no reconciliation occurred either. Just two women connected by the same tragedy, their eyes met and they parted. In the evening, when Liam asked to read the same story about the boat for the 100th time, Katie was thinking about Margaret. Perhaps the mother-in-law is also tormented by guilt for constantly humiliating her son and his wife, or she simply misses Jake. But the past cannot be returned, and no words will heal this wound. Years passed. Liam gradually matured, turning from a timid toddler into an inquisitive and cheerful boy. He really liked books about travel, wild animals, sea expeditions, perhaps because they had a spirit of adventure and freedom. Katie tried to maintain his interest in the world, often reading encyclopedias for children to him and telling him about flora and fauna. "Mom, have you ever been to the jungle or the desert?" he asked, opening his eyes wide. "No, son, I wasn't," she smiled, clearing the dishes from the table. "But if you grow up and want to, you can go there. The main thing is to study and dream." Sometimes he regretted that he did not have a father who could teach manly matters. Katie noticed how Liam looked with envy at his classmate, whom his dad brought to school in the morning. Then she stroked her son's hair and said, "I know it's hard for you, but remember, I'm always there." Inside, her heart sank with pain. "Jake, I have to replace you for him, although this is impossible." She continued to keep photographs of her husband, showed them to Liam, and said, "This is your dad. He was brave, worked in construction, and then in the army. But a misfortune happened." Over the years, the boy understood more and more that his father was gone not because he left, but because died. But Katie did not dare to tell the truth about the real reason. She only said that it was a tragic death in the service, and Liam accepted this without further questions, at least in early childhood. Time passed. Katie was becoming an attractive woman in her late 20s. Loneliness, work, everyday life, all this did not cancel out the fact that she had a natural desire to have a person nearby. But the guilt and memory of Jake's tragedy were stronger than any desires. It was as if she had set herself an internal ban on love. Sometimes men would appear at the flower shop, trying to make acquaintances. "You're so nice, would you like to have some coffee?" Or even more direct, "Maybe we can go for a walk in the evening." But each time Katie politely refused. Hannah noticed this. "Listen, why are you so categorical? You have your whole life ahead of you. Don't you really want to fall in love again?" "I can't." Katie averted her eyes. "I don't deserve this. And I'm too guilty. My husband died. Because of me." Hannah shook her head, trying to convince her. "You can't punish yourself for the rest of your days. Nobody knows what Jake's reasons were." But Katie didn't listen. Everything was clear in her head. "If I allow myself a new love, I will betray Jake's memory and seem to kill him completely." Thus years passed in deliberately chosen solitude. Liam was the only support. He grew up, studied first in primary school, then went to secondary school. Katie worked in a flower shop, gradually increasing her income, sometimes working on the side. She helped Hannah organize weddings and holiday events. Thanks to these earnings, she was able to slightly furnish the outbuilding, change the mattress, put an old washing machine in the annex, buy an inexpensive laptop so that Liam could learn to use a computer. She avoided parties, bars, and dating. Throughout the city, she was perceived as a closed widow with a difficult history. The gossip subsided over time. People got used to the fact that she lives quietly with her son and does not let anyone get close, and that suited her. When Liam turned 12, he was already a fairly independent guy. Tall, thin, inherited dark hair and expressive eyes from his father. He studied well and was especially interested in biology and geography. Katie did everything so that he could attend clubs, although money for additional classes was scarce. Sometimes I even sat late working on additional orders in the store, saving on myself just to buy books for my son or pay for an excursion. "Mom, I want to go to school camp over spring break," Liam said one night as he sat down to dinner. "There will be a hike in the mountains, nature study." The geography teacher said it was a useful experience. Katie worked out her budget in her head. The trip was not cheap, but she understood how important such experiences are for a child. "We'll find a way," she smiled, patting his shoulder. "I'll talk to Mrs. Rose, maybe I'll work more in her garden," and Hannah promised to pay overtime for holiday orders in the run-up to Easter. "Everything will work out." Liam smiled and hugged his mom. "Thank you, you are the best." Squeezing her son into her arms, Katie closed her eyes tightly for a moment. She felt proud that she was able to raise such a bright boy, and sad that Jake was not there to share this feeling. "We do everything together, Jake," she mentally told her husband. "I'm trying to give him what you couldn't, but I hope that somewhere out there you can see him growing." The trip took place, and Liam returned inspired. He showed his mother photographs of mountains and river valleys, told how they pitched a tent and explored a cave with bats. Katie listened with delight, noting how strong-willed and purposeful he had become. "I'm raising a real man," she thought with quiet joy. Time flew by. Liam entered high school. Now he has become a tall young man with a confident posture and curiosity about life. He spent more and more time studying, but also did not forget to help his mother with the housework. He taught himself how to cook simple meals, understand home repairs, helped Mrs. Rose in the garden, and sometimes even went to Hannah to unload flowers or deliver bouquets. It became a part-time job for him, and for the first time he got a taste of his own money, albeit small. Katie sometimes looked at him in amazement. How quickly time flies. It seems to me that just yesterday I was holding him in my arms, and now in front of me is an almost adult guy. Of course, Liam had friends at school who liked girls, but he was in no hurry with his first dates because he devoted a lot of energy to his studies. Katie noticed how, in the evening silence of the outbuilding, he sat over books and internet resources, preparing for exams. The room now contained not an old mattress, but a normal bed, a world map adorned the wall, and a laptop was blinking on the table where Liam could gain knowledge. Son, it's late. It's time for you to sleep, Katie reminded. Mom, a little more. I want to finish this biology project. He was stubborn. Then she smiled. Okay, but don't overdo it. Health is more important. Liam himself dreamed of connecting his life with something that would allow him to travel and study the world, perhaps biology or ecology. He said that he wanted to go to a college that had a corresponding program. Katie, although she was afraid of the costs, was ready to do everything so that he had the opportunity to receive a decent education. One day, Liam returned from a training event beaming with happiness. Mom, our team won first place in the City Science Project competition. We did a study on river pollution and ways to clean it. They gave us a certificate and even a small cash prize. Katie rushed to hug her son, feeling incredible pride and joy. She looked at this letter, where his name was written in large letters, and felt that all her sacrifices, sleepless nights, and struggle for every penny were not in vain. I knew you'd be happy, Liam smiled, slightly embarrassed by her violent reaction. I want to invest this money in buying new educational materials and maybe help Mrs. Rose make a better drain. Tears welled up in Katie's eyes. She saw how caring and responsible he was, how he didn't think only about himself. You are an amazing boy, she said, and Liam laughed. Not a boy anymore, Mom, but a young man. It was one of those moments when the guilt over Jake's death eased a little because Katie understood. I was able to give the world a person who grows up worthy, kind, caring. Liam's high school prom was approaching. Katie helped him choose a modest suit in one of the inexpensive stores. Liam shifted uncomfortably in front of the mirror, trying to figure out if his jacket fit well. That's it, let's adjust the collar a little, Katie said, looking sideways at the price tags. I think it suits you. Shall we take another tie, or do you want a bow tie? To be honest, I don't care, the son shrugged. I don't really like dressing up, but since it's a tradition. Katie smiled. I remember once I was preparing for graduation. Everything was so exciting. And you, a real man, calm, confident. You'll look great in this suit. When the day of the ball itself arrived, Katie walked Liam to school and saw how he mingled with his classmates. The girls have chic hairstyles, the boys have suits. Music was playing, someone was taking selfies, they were laughing and taking pictures. Katie's heart sank. He's already quite an adult, but Jake didn't get to see all this. Returning home, she found an old photo of Jake as a young man at his wedding to her. Slender, in a white shirt, smiling. She remembered how carefree they were, how they believed in love and a bright future. A bitter smile crossed Katie's face. Liam is my future now. I will put all my remaining love into it. After graduating from school, Liam entered an environmental college in another city, about an hour's drive from his hometown. Katie, although she was worried, realized that this was a chance for her son. There was a more serious program there. There was a dormitory. She tried her best to support him, helped him collect documents, buy notebooks and textbooks. The day came when it was time to take Liam to the dorm. Katie prepared in advance everything that might be useful from bed linen to a kettle. She seemed to be reliving the moment of letting go of her child into adulthood. Over the years, he has become her raison d'etre, and now she must live on her own, make her own choices, learn to be independent. Mom, don't worry, I'll come every weekend if I can, Liam said, standing by the car loaded with his things. And if not, then you can come to me too. But don't worry too much, I can handle it. I know you can handle it. You're smart and strong, Katie answered, stroking his cheek. I noticed that this cheek was no longer boyish, but with light stubble. She took her son to the dormitory and helped set up a corner. In a room for 3 people, one guy was already unpacking his backpack and greeted him warmly. Liam immediately entered into a conversation with him, and Katie stood there smiling, feeling mixed feelings of pride and slight fear. When she left, Liam came out to accompany her to the exit from the building. Thank you for everything, Mom, he said quietly, hugging her. Tears welled up, but Katie quickly brushed them away. The main thing is to study well and be happy. I love you. She drove away, looking in the rearview mirror as her son waved to her from the porch. Well, she thought, one more step. He has a new road ahead, and I will return to my little outbuilding, to flowers and silence. Without Liam, the house was silent. For the first time in many years, Katie found herself alone in the evenings. Previously, she always took care of her son, cooking, homework, talking. Now work in the shop took up a day, but after returning home, there were too many hours left before bed. She noticed old memories rising to the surface again. Sitting in the evening with a cup of tea, she thought about Jake, about their first meeting, about mistakes, about how military service became fatal for him, and her betrayal was the final blow. Why is everything like this? I wondered. Could it have been different if we had not gone to his mother? What if we took out a different loan? If I hadn't gone to that wedding then? But life does not like subjunctive moods. She realized that it's impossible to change the past, and therefore it was worth focusing on the present. However, the silence became a heavy burden. Sometimes she would wake up at night, thinking she could hear Liam or Jake, but she knew it was just an echo of a memory. Hannah offered to unwind and go somewhere, but Katie refused. She said, I'm used to solitude. I feel calmer this way. In fact, she was afraid of getting closer, afraid of awakening feelings in herself that might be too strong. Mrs. Rose grew increasingly weaker over the years. Now she needed help not only in the garden, but also in everyday life. Katie took on some of the worries. She bought groceries and cooked dinner. In exchange, Mrs. Rose reduced the rent even more, and sometimes even said, Katie, you've already repaid me for this outhouse a long time ago. If you want, you can consider yourself my tenant, but without money. I am pleased when there is a grandson. Oh, sorry, your son. I'm really confused. Katie thanked her with a smile, but insisted on continuing to pay at least symbolically so as not to feel like a burden. Sitting with a sick old woman who sometimes could not get out of bed, Katie caught herself thinking, this is how life can turn out. A few years ago, I only had the strength not to die of grief, and now I am supporting another person. She tried to read newspapers to Mrs. Rose, helped with medicines, and made small purchases. And in this care, I felt that I was also being healed. When you help someone, the pain inside dulls. Your thoughts switch to a different way. Liam was in his second year of college. He did not visit his mother as often as before because he participated in volunteer programs for environmental protection, went on expeditions, and practiced in laboratories. However, every meeting was a joy. Katie noticed that her son had noticeably matured, gotten stronger, and changed psychologically. He is no longer just a curious boy, but a serious young man who is making plans for the future. One day he said, Mom, I'm thinking about getting a master's degree abroad. We have a joint program with a European university. Of course, I need to pass the language, get a grant. But I have good grades, and the teachers say that there is a chance. Katie's heart sank. If he goes overseas or to Europe, she will see him even less often. But then she stopped herself. Do I have the right to interfere with his dreams? This is amazing. she answered with a smile, trying to hide her excitement. I believe in you. In the evening, after her son left, she cried quietly, holding in her hands a photograph where Liam was very small, and next to him was Jake in military uniform. Jake, he is truly becoming the man we both wanted to raise. You would be proud of him. One day, among the mail, Katie discovered an envelope with her name and slightly trembling, but recognizable handwriting, Margaret Reeves. The very thought that her mother-in-law was writing to her after so many years threw her off balance. My hands began to tremble. She sat down on a bench near the threshold and opened the envelope. Kathy, it may be strange for you to receive a letter from me. I thought for a long time whether to write, but I want to say that I am old. My mother Edna died 6 months ago, and I was left alone. I remember Jake and blame myself for not being a better mother to him. Maybe I myself drove him to despair. I know you blame yourself too, but time has passed. Please, if you think it is necessary, let me know how you are doing, how my grandson Liam is. I understand that I do not deserve your forgiveness, but if you have the desire to at least write me a couple of lines, I will be grateful. Margaret. After reading this, Katie sat for a long time, looking into emptiness. She would never have thought that Margaret would have the courage to say such words and admit her guilt. All the grievances, all the humiliations came to mind. But time, oddly enough, slightly muffled her anger. That evening she decided that she would not leave the letter unanswered. Not for myself, but for Liam, Katie thought. He has the right to communicate with his grandmother if he wants. She wrote a short answer, saying that Liam was already an adult, studying, and everything was fine with him. I live in an outbuilding, I work in floristry, everything is calm for me. I don't hold a grudge against you, Margaret, but I also can't say that we can bring back the past, she concluded the letter. A week later, a warmer answer came, where Margaret asked for forgiveness for your rudeness and inattention when you came to our house. Katie felt relieved deep down. Let this story not be forgotten, but she no longer had the strength to hate. A few more years flew by quickly. Liam graduated from college with honors. Katie attended the graduation ceremony, sitting in the audience with other parents. When her son received his diploma with a smile on stage, she clapped louder than anyone else. After graduating from college, Liam brought his sweetheart, a girl named Isabella, whom he met on a volunteer project, to visit her. Isabella was tall, red-haired, with freckles and a sparkling gaze. Katie looked at her with excitement. How quickly time flies, my son has a girlfriend. Mom, this is Isabella. She came from another state to study, and now together we want to try to get an internship at an environmental organization, Liam said. Isabella smiled shyly, extending her hand. Hello, Mrs. Reeves. Liam told me so much about you that it's like I've known you for a long time. Just call me Katie. I'm glad to meet you, she answered, trying to remain confident, although inside everything was seething with feelings. Pride, slight jealousy, joy. They drank tea in the outbuilding. Isabella admired the garden, where flowers planted by Katie herself could still be seen. Liam asked his mother how she was doing with Mrs. Rose and work. Hannah had retired by that time, passing the business on to her niece, but Katie continued to work there, helping the young mistress. In the evening, when Liam and Isabella left, Katie could not sleep for a long time. She thought about how little space her pain now takes up, how much space her pride for her son takes up. I did everything I could to make him grow up happy and kind. I hope everything works out for them, she said to herself. Months passed. Liam and Isabella moved to a nearby town, where they worked for a small environmental firm, doing research and conducting on-site water quality tests. They also rented a tiny apartment there. Katie visited them sometimes, bringing them homemade cakes and fruits from Mrs. Rose's garden. And then one day Liam called. Mom, I have news. I proposed to Isabella and she accepted. We are planning a wedding. Katie felt everything inside her tremble. Wedding. My son is getting married. There were mixed feelings, delight and anxiety, fear of letting him go completely. but she knew that this was the natural course of life. "This is wonderful, dear. I'm very happy for you. If you need help with preparation, you can count on me." Liam laughed. "Well, of course, you are our flower specialist. We want a small, modest ceremony, but we still need a bridal bouquet and decorations." In the following weeks, Katie really helped the newlyweds draw up guest lists and select decorations. Isabella was not from a wealthy family, so they did not want pomp, but something sincere among family and friends. This was a special challenge for Katie. The wedding reminded her of her own triumph with Jake many years ago, of those dreams and hopes that ended in tragedy. But she tried not to show her inner feelings, but to be happy for her son. The wedding day has arrived. Sunny, warm, as if nature itself favored the young. Liam and Isabella chose a beautiful clearing near their friend's country house, where they placed several wooden benches for guests and an arch decorated with fresh flowers. Of course, Katie made the bride's bouquet with her own hands. She made it with delicate white peonies and green eucalyptus, adding a pastel-colored ribbon. Katie stood among the guests in a light dress, modest but elegant, and watched as Isabella came out to the arch in a simple white outfit, arm in arm with Liam. The bride had a slightly worried but happy face, and Liam had the same look of confidence that she had known since childhood. When the bride and groom said their vows to each other, Katie's tears welled up. She remembered herself and Jake. How then, with a sinking heart, they said yes, believing that life would be long and happy. "Don't repeat our mistakes, son. Be happy. Take care of your wife," she mentally prayed. After the ceremony, the newlyweds talked with the guests, accepted gifts, and congratulations. Katie hugged Isabella. "Welcome to the family. I may not be a perfect mother-in-law, but I will try not to interfere with your happiness," she joked. Isabella laughed. "You are wonderful, Katie. Thank you for all these beautiful flowers and support." Liam walked up to them and hugged both of them. "Mom, I'm so glad that you are here, that you helped us. I hope you're not tired." Katie smiled. "No, no, I'm happy for you." Her eyes were shining with tears. Liam realized that these were not tears of grief, but of quiet joy, and leaned over to hug his mother tightly. After the main part of the celebration, when the guests began to eat and have fun, Katie walked away to the edge of the clearing for a minute. There lay a small lake in which the rays of the evening sun were reflected. The gentle shore, the rustle of the reeds, a light breeze. She stood, remembering everything she had experienced. Early youth, when I met Jake in the city park. The wedding, the birth of Liam, the crisis with Jake's parents. Treason, life in the mother-in-law's house, husband joining the army. His death and her own terrible pain and guilt. Years of struggle for survival, modest happiness in the outbuilding, work in a flower shop. Slow but steady growth of the son, his successes, first steps in adulthood. Today's wedding, full of light and love. She spoke quietly into the void, as if addressing a husband who was no longer in the world. "Jake, do you see this? Our son has become a big man, kind and strong. I don't know if you forgave me there in heaven, but all my life I tried to make amends." The breeze rustled through the reeds. Katie thought she heard a slight echo. Everything is fine. Perhaps it was just her inner voice, allowing her to finally forgive the worst thing myself. "Thank you for giving me a son," she continued in a whisper, "and forgive me. I will no longer beat myself up endlessly. I have to live because Liam and his family may still need my support." Katie closed her eyes, feeling tears rolling down her cheeks. But this time it was tears of reconciliation with the past. When she returned to the guests, someone turned on soft music. Liam approached her, smiling. "Mom, we want to open the dance. Maybe you'll dance with me." She nodded, embarrassed. The music was slow and quiet, and they walked to the center of the site. Liam took her hand, put his other arm around her waist, and they danced. People around began to applaud. It was a touching moment. Mother and adult son, who had already become the head of the new family. "Thank you for being there all these years," Liam said in a low voice, looking into his mother's eyes. "You saved me and yourself, I think. And Dad, somewhere out there, is probably proud of us. Katie nodded, blinking away uninvited tears. I just love you. This has always been my strength. The music carried them away in smooth movements, and an atmosphere of love, reconciliation, and celebration of life was in the air. So, many years after the tragedy, Katie learned to accept her past. She did not enter into any further relationships, remaining faithful to her husband's memory and her own choice. But she did not become a recluse, did not turn into an embittered person. On the contrary, she managed to raise her son, putting all her soul and love into him. Liam, having grown up and started a family, has found the happy future that his parents once dreamed of. And although Jake didn't get to see his son grow, Liam's proud fatherly spirit seemed to echo in every step. On Liam's wedding day, Katie finally felt harmony. She understood that her past could not be undone, her mistake could not be corrected, but she could forgive me and move on. She could give flowers, watch the sunrise in her outbuilding, look after Mrs. Rose, come to visit her son and daughter-in-law, and play with her future grandchildren. The wind carried away bitter memories, leaving the most valuable experience, strength, and love. Sometimes in the silence of the night, Katie still talked mentally to Jake. We didn't manage to live together for long, but what was left of our love was this amazing guy. I hope you find peace. And every time she felt a quiet warmth in her chest, as if Jake's invisible hand was hugging her, saying, "It's all over now. Live, Katie, live." Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.